me go! I didn't do anything!
Sir, calm down. You're under arrest.
Arrest? This is a setup!
We have our orders. Stop resisting.
You can't do this!
The afternoon sun baked the Los Angeles pavement to 105 degrees. Inside the Sterling real estate firm, the air conditioning blew ice cold across imported marble floors. A ragged old man, wearing paint-stained jeans and duct-taped work boots, pushed open the heavy glass doors. He stood alone. A slick, arrogant broker in a $3,000 Italian suit blocked his path, sneering when he saw the dirt under the old man's fingernails. The broker signaled security to throw him out, but the old man did not back down. He reached into his worn-out pocket and pulled out a solid black titanium card. If you have ever stepped inside a luxury real estate firm, you know the feeling. Everything there is designed to make you feel painfully small if you do not belong. The Sterling Real Estate Group in Beverly Hills was the absolute peak of that kind of pressure. It was not just an office. It was a fortress of marble and glass. Outside, the Los Angeles afternoon sun was brutally merciless, heating the concrete sidewalks to 105 degrees. Heat waves distorted the air above the parked supercars. But inside the Sterling office, it was an entirely different planet. The industrial air conditioning was turned down to a freezing 68 degrees. Soft jazz played from high-end speakers hidden in the ceiling. The air carried a faint scent of expensive citrus and old money. Behind the massive curved reception desk, carved from a single slab of black Italian marble, stood Julian. He was not just a broker. He considered himself the gatekeeper of the elite. He was 28 years old, with perfectly styled hair, shaped by pomade that cost more than a minimum wage paycheck. He wore a custom-tailored charcoal suit that fit his shoulders perfectly, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie tied with a flawless dimple. At that moment, Julian was standing beside the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a crystal flute of sparkling water, looking out at the blazing street with absolute contempt. He slowly raised his left hand, adjusting his French cuff only so he could admire the weight and shine of his two-tone Rolex Datejust. He loved that watch. He loved that suit. He loved the feeling of looking through the dark, soundproof glass, watching ordinary people sweat as they passed by. In his eyes, they were not human beings. They were meaningless background scenery for his glittering, successful life. He took a slow sip from the crystal glass, waiting for his 2 o'clock appointment, a tech millionaire looking for a summer home. Julian hated walk-ins. In his mind, real clients arrived in black cars with private drivers. They did not walk in from the street. So when he saw a lone figure slowly climbing the pristine white concrete steps toward the main entrance, his jaw tightened immediately. He watched the man approach. The man moved slowly, clearly exhausted by the punishing heat. Julian's eyes immediately scanned the man's clothing, performing a cruel calculation of his net worth. The man was not wearing linen. He was not wearing a tailored jacket. The heavy tinted glass door was pushed open. Burning heat from the street rushed into the freezing lobby for a moment, and then the man stepped inside. It was Arthur. Arthur was 71 years old. He looked exactly like a man who had spent his entire life swinging a hammer and carrying lumber under the burning sun. He wore a thick, faded flannel shirt, completely inappropriate for the Los Angeles heat. The elbows were worn thin, and dry white paint was splattered across the chest pocket. His jeans were stiff with dirt and grease at the knees, But the worst thing in Julian's eyes was the boots. Arthur wore a pair of heavy steel-toed work boots. The leather on the right toe had split open, revealing the dull gray steel underneath. They left faint, dusty footprints on the polished black marble floor. The contrast in the room was jarring. The soft jazz music seemed to collide with the old man's heavy breathing. The expensive citrus scent was immediately overpowered by the smell of old sweat, dried plaster, and cheap soap. Two young brokers sitting on the leather couches in the waiting area instantly stopped talking. One of them visibly wrinkled her nose and pulled her designer handbag closer to her body. The receptionist at the desk stiffened, her hand hovering near the silent panic button. They all looked at Arthur as if a dirty wild animal had just wandered into a museum. Arthur did not seem to notice the disgusted stares. He was not intimidated by the marble or the crystal. He simply wiped his calloused, dirt-stained hand across his sweating forehead, took a deep breath of the freezing air, and looked around the room. His eyes stopped on the massive illuminated architectural model in the center of the lobby. Julian set his crystal glass down on a side table. He did not walk over to welcome a potential client. He walked over to intercept a problem. He moved quickly, stepping directly into Arthur's path before the old man could get any closer to the expensive displays. Julian put on a terrifyingly fake smile, the kind of smile he reserved for people he was about to throw out. The smile did not reach his eyes. His eyes were cold as they swept over the paint stains on Arthur's chest with open contempt. Arthur stopped. He looked at the young broker. When he spoke, his voice was gravelly, dry from the heat, but completely polite. "Excuse me, son," Arthur said, pointing his rough hand toward the glowing model. "I saw the listing in the window. I'd like to know more about the Bel Air property, the one on the ridge." Julian froze. He looked at the model Arthur was pointing to. It was the crown jewel of Sterling's portfolio, a glass and steel compound worth $25 million, sitting on 3 acres of prime Bel Air real estate. Julian looked back at Arthur. He looked at the torn steel-toed boots. He looked at the dirt under the old man's fingernails. The fake professional smile on Julian's face slowly disappeared. In its place came an arrogant smirk. He let out a short, mocking laugh and shook his head slightly, as if Arthur had just told a pathetic joke. Julian did not move aside. He stayed where he was, deliberately blocking Arthur from reaching the center of the room. The silence in the lobby grew heavier and thicker. The receptionist stopped typing. The junior brokers watched with held breath because they knew exactly how Julian worked. He was a predator, and he had just found the weakest prey imaginable. Julian let the condescending smile settle perfectly across his face. He looked Arthur up and down, making a deliberate show of judging the cheap paint-stained flannel and the filthy steel-toed boots that were falling apart. Then he spoke. His voice was smooth, polished, and completely poisoned. "The Bel Air property," Julian repeated, stretching out the words as if he were explaining something very simple to a slow child. "Are you sure you are in the right place, my friend? Maybe you are looking for the public library down the street. It has excellent air conditioning, and it is completely free." Arthur did not flinch. His deeply lined, sun-weathered face stayed completely calm. He did not raise his voice. He did not show anger. He simply looked at Julian with steady, tired eyes. "I am in the right place," Arthur said. "I saw the $25 million listing. I want to see the floor plans and discuss the property boundaries." This time, Julian laughed loudly. It was a sharp, cold sound that echoed across the imported marble walls. He shook his head and looked around the room, as if inviting the other brokers to join the joke. "You want to discuss the property boundaries of a $25 million compound," Julian said, his voice full of absolute sarcasm. "Listen very carefully, old man. This is sterling real estate. We do not sell mobile homes. We do not sell repossessed houses to fix and flip. We serve only the top 1% of the top 1%. The people who buy our properties do not wear work boots that are literally falling apart." Julian stepped closer to Arthur. He completely abandoned the fake professional tone. The poison was now fully exposed. "Do you have any idea what it costs just to maintain the landscaping on a place like that?" Julian asked, his voice low and aggressive. "The monthly homeowners association fee alone is probably more than you have earned in your entire miserable life. The property taxes would bankrupt you completely before the first quarter was even over." Arthur stood still. He listened to every insult. He did not interrupt. He did not defend himself. He slowly reached into the front pocket of his faded jeans. His hand came out holding a small, battered spiral notebook and a cheap wooden pencil that had been chewed at the end. He opened the notebook to a blank page. "All right," Arthur said calmly, placing the pencil against the paper. "Then let us talk about the homeowners association fees. What exactly do they cover? Security? Maintenance? Does it include access to the private road?" Julian stared at him. The old man was not backing down. He was not intimidated. That made Julian even more furious. His ego could not tolerate being ignored by someone he considered absolute trash. He decided to end the conversation right there. "Put the notebook away," Julian snapped, his voice rising as the last layer of polish began to peel off. "You are not writing anything down. I am not going to stand here and waste my extremely valuable time explaining luxury real estate concepts to a vagrant who clearly walked in here just to enjoy the air conditioning." Julian raised his hand, one perfectly manicured finger pointing straight toward the heavy glass doors. "Get out," Julian ordered. "You are making my clients uncomfortable. You are making my staff uncomfortable. And honestly, the smell is becoming unbearable. Turn around, walk through those doors, and never set foot in a Sterling office again. If you do not leave right now, I will have security drag you out by that filthy collar." Arthur did not look at the door. He did not look at the security cameras. He looked straight into Julian's arrogant, angry eyes. He slowly closed the old notebook and slipped it into his pocket. Then he took a deep breath and stood his ground on the polished marble floor. The spring was being compressed. The tension was rising, and Arthur was only getting started. Julian took one aggressive step forward. He folded his arms across his perfectly tailored Italian suit. His voice shifted from fake politeness into a sharp, rapid stream of corporate jargon. He wanted to bury this old man under a mountain of financial terminology. He wanted to make him feel small, ignorant, and completely out of place. "The listing price is $25 million, Julian said, every word cutting sharply into the next. "That is only the baseline. We have not even discussed escalation clauses based on the current high-yield market index. Do you understand capital gains tax in this specific bracket, sir? Because simply transferring the deed would create a 7-figure penalty right from the start." Arthur did not flinch. He did not look confused. He simply kept the pencil hovering over his old notebook. "And that is only the purchase," Julian continued, his voice growing louder and filling the quiet lobby. "Let us talk about liquidity. Sterling Real Estate does not accept standard mortgage contingencies for Tier 1 properties. We require proof of liquid assets covering at least 40% of the purchase price before we even open the gate for a showing. Do you have $10 million sitting in a checking account right now? Arthur looked down at his notebook. He carefully drew one straight line across the page. And then there is maintenance, Julian said, almost spitting out the words. The homeowners association fee is completely non-negotiable. It covers private security, structural glass cleaning, and specialized ridge landscaping. Do you know what that costs? Julian leaned closer. He wanted Arthur to feel the full weight of his contempt. The monthly trash removal fee for that house, Julian sneered, is probably higher than the total value of your entire miserable life. The insult hung in the freezing air-conditioned room. The junior brokers on the leather couches exchanged tense glances. Even the receptionist looked slightly uncomfortable. It was a direct attack on the old man's dignity. Arthur did not react. He did not yell. He did not clench his fists. He did not try to defend his pride. He only raised his head from the notebook. He looked at Julian's perfectly styled hair, his silk tie, and the expensive Rolex shining on his wrist. I understand, Arthur said quietly. His gravelly voice was strangely calm. So the homeowners association fees include private security. That is good to know. He looked down and carefully wrote the word security on the lined page. Julian stared at him. The old man was completely ignoring the insult. He was treating this arrogant, furious broker like a simple information desk. Arthur's lack of reaction made Julian even angrier than if he had shouted back. Julian's face turned red. He realized his tactic of intimidating Arthur with technical terms had completely failed. The old man was not afraid. He was just taking notes. Julian stared at Arthur. The absolute nerve of this dirty old man, trying to take notes inside a luxury real estate firm, was pushing him to the limit. Julian did not just want to throw him out anymore. He wanted to crush him completely. He wanted Arthur to feel so small that he would never dare look at a $25 million property again. Julian's eyes moved across the lobby. He saw a small silver tray sitting on the edge of the reception desk. On the tray were several small glass bottles of imported mineral water, reserved only for clients waiting to sign multi-million-dollar contracts. Julian walked to the desk. He did not ask the receptionist. He simply snatched one of the small glass bottles from the silver tray. Then he walked back to Arthur and held it out. Arthur looked at the bottle, then at Julian. He did not reach for it. "Take it," Julian said. His voice dripped with thick, fake pity. The kind of voice someone uses when speaking to a stray dog digging through the trash. "You look thirsty, old man. Take the water. It's free. This office does not charge for charity." Arthur still did not reach out. He looked at the condescending smile stuck to Julian's face. Julian let out a sharp sigh, pretending to be helpless. He reached forward and shoved the cold glass bottle directly into Arthur's paint-stained chest, forcing the old man to catch it so it would not fall and break on the marble floor. Then Julian did something even worse than shouting. He extended his right hand, using only his index and middle fingers, as if he were afraid of catching a disease. He patted Arthur twice on the shoulder of his old flannel shirt. It was a gesture of total, undisguised superiority. "Drink the water," Julian said, his voice dropping lower, losing the fake pity and returning to pure ice. "Drink it." Then I want you to turn around, walk through those glass doors, and find a shady spot on the sidewalk to beg for your next meal. You are polluting the air in here. You are ruining the aesthetic of this place for people who actually matter. This is not a shelter. This is a place of business, and you have no right to exist in the same zip code as the people I represent. Julian pulled his hand back quickly and rubbed those 2 fingers against the fabric of his expensive suit pants, deliberately showing his disgust at having touched the old man's shirt. Arthur looked down at the small glass bottle in his calloused, dirt-stained hand. Condensation ran down its sides. He looked back at Julian. He did not throw the bottle. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend his dignity or explain why he was wearing steel-toed boots. He simply held the water, his expression completely unreadable. Julian did not know it yet, but he had just crossed a line he would never be able to come back from. The spring had been compressed to the end, the trap had been set, and the arrogant broker had eagerly stepped right into it. The tension in the lobby changed. It was no longer just a private confrontation between an arrogant broker and an old man. The audience began to take part. In the luxury leather seating area, the real clients, the people Julian believed were worthy of breathing the conditioned air, began making a scene. A woman wearing a large diamond bracelet dramatically waved a glossy property brochure in front of her face. She locked eyes with Julian, her expression a mask of wealthy entitlement and absolute disgust. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough for the entire room to hear. "Are we running a charity intake program here today? Because the smell in this lobby is becoming absolutely unbearable. I cannot even focus on these listings." Her husband, a man in a perfectly tailored linen suit, spoke up too, loudly clearing his throat. "Honestly, Julian, we pay a huge premium to work with Sterling specifically to avoid people like this. This is completely unacceptable." Julian's face tightened. His most profitable clients were publicly questioning his control over the floor. That was the absolute limit. He reached inside his tailored jacket and pulled out a slim black walkie-talkie. He did not turn away from Arthur. He kept his eyes locked on the old man's face, raised the radio to his mouth, and made sure every word was clearly heard. "Security!" Julian barked into the radio. His voice was sharp, loud, and completely stripped of professional courtesy. "We have a code 3 in the main lobby. I need immediate forced removal. Yes. A vagrant. He is harassing VIP clients and refusing to leave the premises. Get up here now." He clipped the radio back onto his belt. He looked at Arthur, fully expecting the old man to finally panic. He expected Arthur to turn and run before the heavy-handed security guards arrived and threw him onto the burning Los Angeles pavement. Arthur did not run. He did not look at the VIP clients who had just openly insulted him. He did not look toward the heavy glass doors where security would appear. Instead, he slowly turned away from Julian. He stepped closer to the massive, brightly lit architectural model of the $25 million Bel Air compound. He leaned close, completely fascinated by the fine details. He looked at the tiny infinity pool, the miniature imported palm trees, and the wide glass walls overlooking the simulated Los Angeles skyline. As he leaned in, his right hand naturally came up to steady himself. His thick, calloused fingers, stained with dried paint and deep dirt, gently touched the perfectly clear plexiglass case protecting the model. Julian saw it. The sight of that dirty hand touching the spotless display case triggered something instinctive inside him. It was as if Arthur had wiped mud directly across Julian's face. "Hey!" Julian shouted. It was not a professional warning. It was a raw, unfiltered roar of anger. He lunged forward. He did not just ask Arthur to step back. He reached out and grabbed Arthur's forearm hard. Julian squeezed the old man's arm, his manicured fingers digging into the old flannel fabric, then violently shoved Arthur's hand away from the glass. "Do not touch that," Julian snarled, his face inches from Arthur's, completely out of control. "Do not put your filthy, disgusting hands on company property. You are leaving. Right now. You will walk out through those doors, or my security guards will drag you out by your hair. Do you understand me, you pathetic old piece of trash?" Arthur stumbled slightly from the shove. He regained his balance. He looked down at the place on his arm where Julian had grabbed him. Then he looked back at the young broker. The polite, quiet old man was gone. Arthur's eyes changed. The absolute calm remained, but behind it was something dense and heavy, a terrifying, silent gravity. Julian stood there, breathing slightly hard. The veins in his neck stood out. He had completely lost the carefully built mask of calm expected from a luxury real estate broker. The Sterling Real Estate Group lobby, normally quiet and softly lit, was now utterly silent except for his heavy breathing. Everyone was watching. The receptionists, the junior brokers, and the VIP clients on the leather couches all had their eyes locked on the scene. Julian glared at Arthur. The old man had barely moved. The violent shove had pushed him back only half a step. The notebook was still in Arthur's hand. The cheap pencil was still ready. The maddening calm, radiating from the old man, felt like a direct insult to Julian's authority. He could not understand how a dirty vagrant in broken steel-toed boots could stand in the middle of a $25 million real estate office without looking afraid. Julian's ego demanded total submission, and he was going to get it. "You deaf old fool!" Julian shouted, the sound echoing off the imported Italian marble walls. "I told you to get out." He did not wait for the security team he had just called. He lunged again. This time, he did not aim for Arthur's arm. He swung his hand and knocked the small, battered spiral notebook out of Arthur's grip. The notebook flew through the air. It hit the polished floor with a dull, pathetic slap. The cheap wooden pencil skittered across the marble, spinning until it struck the base of the reception desk. Julian pointed a trembling, manicured finger directly into Arthur's face. "You are nothing but disgusting, stinking homeless man who wandered in here for free air conditioning. Do you know how much this floor is worth? Your filthy boots are grinding dirt into marble worth more than your entire miserable, pathetic existence. You are a complete joke." Arthur looked down at the notebook on the floor. The pages had fallen open, revealing neat, precise handwriting about square footage, property taxes, and structural layouts. He looked back at Julian. He did not shout back. He did not throw a punch. He maintained that heavy, terrifying silence. "I am going to have you arrested for trespassing," Julian sneered, stepping so close he could smell the dried paint on Arthur's shirt. "And when the police get here, I will make sure they process you for property damage, just for walking on my floor. Now, pick up your garbage and get out of my sight before I throw you into the street myself." Arthur did not bend down to pick up the notebook. He simply reached into his front pocket. It was a slow, deliberate movement. Julian scoffed. He thought the old man was reaching for a dirty tissue, or maybe a few coins to offer as a pathetic bribe. He folded his arms, ready to laugh. The heavy glass doors at the front of the lobby suddenly burst open. The two security guards Julian had called finally arrived. They were huge and dressed in black tactical uniforms. They rushed into the freezing lobby, their boots thudding against the marble. They saw Julian pointing. They saw the old man in the dirty flannel standing beside the expensive architectural model. They asked no questions. They moved in. The two massive guards did not hesitate. They had been trained to protect the elite atmosphere of the Sterling Real Estate Group, and a paint-stained old man standing beside their star-broker was clearly a violation. One guard grabbed Arthur's left shoulder, the other grabbed his right arm. They moved with strong, practiced force, trying to turn the old man around and lock his hands behind his back. Arthur was 71, but his muscles had been built by 50 years of lifting steel and swinging sledgehammers. He did not yield immediately. He planted his broken steel-toed boots firmly on the marble floor. The guard on his right pulled harder, twisting Arthur's arm upward. A sharp, tearing sound ripped through the quiet lobby. The old fabric of Arthur's faded flannel could not withstand the force. The seam at his right shoulder tore open completely, exposing sun-weathered, age-spotted skin underneath. The VIP clients on the couches gasped, and some pulled out their phones to record the scene. The receptionist stood up, horrified. Julian just stood there, adjusting his silk tie, extremely satisfied. He had restored order to his kingdom. Arthur stopped resisting. He let the guards pull his arms behind his back. He did not struggle. He did not cry out in pain. He simply stood there with the torn shirt hanging from his shoulder. The heavy, terrifying silence he carried had not broken. He looked past the two security guards. He looked directly at Julian. The broker was smirking, already turning away to return to his crystal glass of sparkling water. "I told you," Arthur said. His voice was no longer small. It was a deep, gravelly boom that cut through the hum of the air conditioning. It commanded the whole room. "I want to buy the Bel Air property." Julian stopped. He slowly turned around. He looked at the old man being held by two massive guards, his shirt torn, dirt smeared across his cheek. Julian could not believe what he had just heard. The delusion was absolute. Julian gave a theatrical laugh. He clapped his hands once, slowly. "You want to buy it?" Julian sneered, walking back toward Arthur. "With what exactly? Did you find a giant pile of aluminum cans today? Or are you planning to pay $25 million with wrinkled $1 bills and pocket lint?" Julian motioned to security. "Get him out of here. He is completely insane." "Wait," Arthur said. His voice was like an iron bar. It was an order, not a request. He looked at the guard holding his right arm. "Let go of my hand. I am going to pay right now." The guard hesitated, looking at Julian for confirmation. Julian rolled his eyes and gave a dismissive wave. He wanted to see how far this pathetic act would go. He wanted the old man to completely humiliate himself in front of the entire office. The guard released Arthur's right hand, but kept a firm grip on his left shoulder. Arthur slowly reached his freed, paint-stained hand into the back pocket of his stiff, dirty jeans. He did not pull out a crumpled checkbook. He did not pull out a wad of filthy cash. He pulled out a wallet. It was not a designer wallet. It was an old, heavily worn, dark brown leather wallet. It looked like it had survived a war. The stitching was frayed, and the leather had been darkened by decades of sweat and motor oil. Julian burst out laughing again. Oh, this is perfect. He is going to try to max out his Social Security card. Arthur ignored him. He opened the old leather wallet. He did not rummage. He knew exactly what he was looking for. He reached his thick, calloused index finger and thumb into a hidden slot in the back. He pulled something out. It was not paper. It was not an ordinary plastic credit card. It caught the light from the crystal chandeliers in a strange way. It did not reflect the light. It seemed to absorb it. Arthur held it out. He did not hand it to Julian. He held it in the air, letting the object speak for itself. Then he turned his wrist slightly and tapped the edge of the card against the thick plexiglass covering the Bel Air model. It did not make the dull click of plastic. It made a sharp, heavy metallic clink. The sound cut through the lobby like a gunshot. It was the unmistakable sound of solid metal hitting glass. Julian's laughter caught in his throat. The smug smile vanished from his face instantly. He stared at the object in the old man's dirty fingers. The whole room went dead silent. The spring had been compressed to its absolute limit. The lock was about to break. Julian burst out laughing. It was loud, ugly, and insanely confident. He looked at the frayed leather wallet, then at the guards, then back at the old man. "You are going to pay me right now," Julian wheezed, wiping a tear of amusement from his eye. "Are you going to pay in pennies, or did you find a nice coupon in the dumpster out back?" The two guards exchanged a glance. The one holding Arthur's left shoulder loosened his grip slightly, unsure whether he was restraining a threat or just a very confused old man. Arthur did not look at the guards. He did not look at Julian. He looked down at his old wallet. His thick, paint-stained fingers reached into a hidden slot behind the cash pocket. He did not pull out an old dollar bill. He did not pull out a standard bank card. He pulled out a solid piece of metal. It was completely black. It was not plastic. It was matte, absorbing the bright light from the crystal chandeliers above. Arthur held it out. He did not give it to Julian. He held it between his calloused thumb and forefinger, extending his hand past the guard's loosened grip. He moved his arm slightly and tapped the card's edge against the clear plexiglass box protecting the architectural model. Clink! It was a sharp, high, unmistakable sound. The sound of heavy metal striking hard plastic. It echoed through the silent lobby. Julian's laughter died instantly. His smile disappeared. He stared at the object in the old man's hand. The entire room became terrifyingly quiet. The heavy air of the luxury real estate firm suddenly felt suffocating. The tension had peaked. The lock had broken. The entire Sterling Real Estate Group lobby froze. The sound of the metal card touching plexiglass was wrong. Too heavy. Too sharp. Julian stared at the card held between Arthur's dirty fingers. His mind desperately tried to process what he was seeing. It was not a Visa. It was not an American Express Centurion. It had no magnetic stripe and no visible chip on the front. It was a solid block of black titanium, completely non-reflective. No raised account numbers ran across the middle. No expiration date. There was not even a bank logo on its surface. The only marking on the entire card was in the center. It was a deeply engraved, extremely intricate family crest filled with brilliant white gold. It caught the chandelier light and shimmered with quiet, absolute authority. Julian's breath caught. He had worked in luxury brokerage for 5 years. He had seen wealth. He had seen black cards, platinum cards, and private banking portfolios. But he had only heard rumors of this card. It was an invitation only, zero limit asset transfer key, issued by a private vault in Geneva. You could not apply for it. You had to possess a net worth in the 10-figure range just to be considered for an invitation. But Julian's ego was too massive to accept the reality standing in front of him. His mind aggressively rejected the information. He looked at Arthur's torn, paint-stained flannel shirt. He looked at the cracked, steel-toed boots. "Fake," Julian choked out, his voice high and tense. He pointed a trembling finger at the black titanium card. "That thing is fake. Where did you get it, old man? Did you steal it from a movie set? Or did you buy a toy card online to scam your way into a free lunch?" The two guards looked closer. The one still holding Arthur's left shoulder narrowed his eyes at the heavy metal card. He was not a financial expert, but he knew what real weight looked like. Julian stepped forward and reached out aggressively to snatch the card from Arthur's hand. "I am confiscating this. I am calling the police right now for fraud." Arthur did not pull his hand back. He let Julian grab the edge of the card, but Julian could not pull it away. Arthur's grip, forged by decades of manual labor, was like a steel vise. He held the titanium card perfectly still. Julian pulled harder, his face turning red from effort and embarrassment. "Let go, you crazy old man." Before Julian could yank again, a loud, sharp sound broke the tension in the lobby. The heavy, soundproof glass doors at the main entrance did not simply open. They were pushed wide by two men in matching gray suits with clear earpieces. The whole room turned to look. Stepping through the doors, flanked by security, was a man in his late 50s. He wore a navy pinstripe suit worth more than a mid-sized sedan. His silver hair was perfectly swept back. He carried an aura of absolute, frightening command. It was Richard Sterling, founder and chief executive officer of the Sterling Real Estate Group. He was supposed to be in New York. He was famous for brutal, unannounced inspections of his regional offices to make sure the elite standards of his brand were maintained perfectly. Julian immediately released the metal card. All color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly gray. He quickly smoothed his tie, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Mr. Sterling," Julian stammered, his voice cracking. "Welcome. We did not know you were coming. I apologize for the disturbance. We are just dealing with an intruder." A vagrant wandered in from the street. Richard Sterling did not look at Julian. He stopped in the middle of the marble floor. His sharp eyes scanned the room. He saw the panicked receptionist. He saw the junior brokers standing stiffly. He saw the offended VIP clients. Then he saw the scene beside the architectural model. He saw the two massive guards. He saw the old man in the torn flannel shirt and broken boots. Sterling's eyes locked onto the old man's face. The chief executive officer of a multi-billion-dollar empire stopped breathing. His perfectly tailored shoulders sank. His eyes widened in absolute, unfiltered horror. Richard Sterling's eyes stayed locked on Arthur's face. He completely ignored Julian. He ignored the VIP clients. He ignored the fact that he was the CEO of a huge corporation standing in the center of his own flagship office. He took one step forward. His polished Oxford shoes seemed to drag across the marble floor. Julian noticed the sudden shift in the CEO's demeanor. He completely misunderstood it. He thought Sterling was horrified that a vagrant had been allowed so far into the building. Julian stepped forward, eager to prove he was handling the situation. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry," Julian said loudly, trying to show authority in front of his boss. "I already called security. This crazy old man is refusing to leave. He even tried to hand me a fake black card. Can you believe the delusion? I am going to have him arrested immediately." Sterling did not look at Julian. He raised his left hand in a sharp gesture, demanding silence. His eyes remained fixed entirely on the old man in the torn shirt. Sterling took another slow step forward, closing the distance between himself and Arthur. The two large guards, sensing the intense weight of the CEO's attention, instinctively loosened their grip on Arthur's arms. Sterling stopped about 2 feet from Arthur. He looked down at the old man's chest. He looked at the white paint splattered across the faded flannel. He looked at the torn shoulder seam. Then he looked down at the floor, directly at the solid black titanium card, still held between Arthur's thick, calloused fingers. Sterling saw the deeply engraved white gold family crest in the center of the card, the crest of the Pendleton family. The color did not merely drain from Sterling's face. His entire posture collapsed. The frightening aura of the untouchable CEO vanished immediately. His breathing became shallow and fast. He reached up with a trembling hand to loosen his expensive silk tie, suddenly feeling as if he were suffocating in the air-conditioned room. He looked back at Arthur's calm, weathered face. The old man looked right back at him, eyes completely steady, entirely unimpressed by the CEO's tailored suit or power. "Sir," Sterling whispered. His voice was completely hollow, stripped of all command. It was barely audible beneath the soft jazz still playing from the ceiling. Julian frowned, confused. He leaned slightly closer, trying to hear what his boss had just said to the vagrant. Sterling ignored Julian completely. He turned his head slightly, his eyes burning with terrifying intensity as he glared at the two guards still standing beside Arthur. "Let him go," Sterling snarled. It was not a corporate instruction. It was a panicked, desperate order. "Let him go right now. Get your hands off him." The guards flinched. They immediately released Arthur and stepped back quickly, completely confused by the CEO's violent reaction. Sterling turned back to Arthur. He did not extend a hand to shake. He did not offer a polite corporate apology. The CEO of the Sterling Real Estate Group, a man who regularly dined with senators and tech billionaires, simply let his knees give way. He dropped straight onto the polished black marble floor. He knelt directly in front of Arthur's dirty, broken steel-toed work boots. He placed both hands flat on the floor before him, lowering his head in a posture of total submission. "I am so sorry, Mr. Pendleton," Sterling choked out, his voice shaking through the silent lobby. "Please forgive me. I had absolutely no idea you were coming to this office today." Julian stood frozen. The crystal glass in his hand suddenly felt unbearably heavy. The world had stopped spinning. The CEO was kneeling in the dust left by the old man's boots. "Mr. Pendleton." Julian's mind raced, trying to connect the name. He knew that name. Every broker in the country knew that name. Arthur Pendleton, the mysterious billionaire industrialist, the man who owned the controlling interest in the massive private equity fund that had quietly bought 60% of the Sterling Real Estate Group only 3 months earlier. Julian looked at the old man in the torn shirt. He looked at the dirt under his fingernails. He looked at the black titanium card. The old man was not a vagrant. He was not insane. He was the owner of the entire company, and Julian had just told him his life was completely worthless. Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling Real Estate, did not move. His face was a mask of pure crystalline horror. He looked at the two security guards. He looked at Arthur. Then he looked at Julian, who was still standing there, face drained of color, mouth slightly open in a silent, pathetic expression of absolute shock. "Mr. Pendleton," Sterling whispered. He did not stand. He could not. His legs had completely betrayed him. I had no idea you were coming. I am so incredibly sorry for this situation." Arthur Pendleton, the man in the torn, paint-stained flannel shirt, did not say a word. He did not look at the CEO. He did not look at security. He kept his eyes fixed on the architectural model of the $25 million compound. Julian's brain finally caught up with the reality of the moment. The name Pendleton struck him like a physical blow to the chest. Arthur Pendleton, the man who owned the private equity fund that had acquired 60% of Sterling Real Estate only months earlier. The man whose signature appeared on every major land acquisition contract in the state. Julian felt the world spin around him. The lobby, the marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, everything suddenly felt fragile. He looked down at his own hands, the hands that had shoved this billionaire, the hands that had knocked away his notebook, the hands that had just signed his own professional death warrant. His knees suddenly gave out. He did not even realize he was falling until his dress pants hit the cold, hard marble. He collapsed onto the floor right beside the CEO. "Mr. Pendleton, please," Julian stammered, his voice breaking into a desperate, high-pitched whine. "I did not know. I swear to you, I did not know who you were. I thought you were." Arthur slowly turned his head. He looked down at Julian. There was no rage in his eyes, no righteous anger, only a deep, freezing indifference. He looked at Julian the way someone might look at an insect stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "You thought I was nothing," Arthur said, his voice flat, steady, and terrifyingly cold. "You thought my life had no value because of how I was dressed. You decided my presence was an insult to your precious marble floors." Arthur turned back to the model. "But you were right about one thing," Arthur continued, his eyes scanning the layout of the Bel Air property. "You said the maintenance on this house is expensive. And you were right. It is. It is far too expensive to be managed by someone who cannot even manage the basic human decency required to speak to a stranger." Arthur glanced at the CEO, who was still bowing his head on the floor. "Richard," Arthur said calmly. "Yes, Mr. Pendleton," Sterling whispered, not daring to raise his eyes. Arthur stood there, the torn fabric on his shoulder moving slightly in the air-conditioned breeze. He was the most powerful person in the room, and he looked like the least powerful. "This place is empty," Arthur said, gesturing around the lobby. "It is full of expensive furniture and expensive suits, but inside it is completely empty. You should fix that." Julian stood frozen. The crystal glass in his right hand began to shake. His fingers trembled so hard, the glass tapped rhythmically against his signet ring. Then it happened. The glass shattered. It did not merely crack. It exploded. Shards of crystal rained onto the polished black marble floor like sharp diamonds. Julian did not even flinch. He did not look down at the blood blooming in his palm. His eyes stayed locked on the top of Richard Sterling's head, still bowed in total pathetic submission. The air in the lobby turned icy. The other brokers, the VIP clients, and the receptionist all pulled back. They retreated into the shadows of the room, leaving Julian completely alone in the center of the floor. Julian's breathing came in sharp, broken gasps. Sweat gathered on his forehead and rolled down his perfectly groomed temples, cutting thin trails through his expensive foundation. He tried to speak. His throat was a desert. Nothing came out except a dry, pathetic rattle. Richard Sterling slowly stood. He did not look at the CEO's chair. He did not look at the other brokers. He turned his head. His eyes were not merely angry. They were the eyes of a man who had just watched his entire future burn to ash. Sterling looked at Julian. The CEO did not shout. He did not scream. He spoke in a low, frightening tremor that was far worse than a roar. "Do you have any idea what you have just done?" Sterling whispered. Julian's knees turned to water. He fell to the floor again, not because he was bowing, but because he no longer had the strength to hold himself up. I did not know," Julian stammered, his voice cracking. He was sobbing now. It was an ugly, desperate sound. I thought he was a vagrant." Sterling walked toward him. He did not move like a businessman. He moved like an executioner. He stopped directly in front of Julian and looked down. "You thought," Sterling repeated, his voice rising with terrifying force. "You thought you were protecting the image of this company. You thought you were filtering out the filth." Sterling pointed directly at Julian's chest. His finger trembled with raw, undisguised fury. "You idiot! You absolute fool!" Sterling's voice became a deafening roar that seemed to shake the foundation of the lobby. "Do you know who that man is? That is Arthur Pendleton. He holds 60% of the voting shares in this entire conglomerate. He does not just own the building, he owns the land beneath it. He owns the mortgage on your house. He owns the very air you are breathing right now." Sterling bent down, his face only inches from Julian's. His voice dropped into a jagged, lethal whisper. "You did not just insult a client, Julian. You destroyed the most important partnership of our lifetime. You did not just throw out a guest. You threw out the landlord." Julian looked up at him, his face frozen in absolute paralyzing terror. He tried to crawl backward, his designer suit sliding across broken glass, but his back struck the base of the architectural model. He was trapped. Sterling straightened, his face turning a dangerous dark purple. He looked at the two guards. "Get him out of my sight," Sterling ordered, his voice cold and final. "Throw him into the street, then call legal. I want him sued into the Stone Age. I want every asset he owns frozen before the sun goes down." Julian let out a gut-wrenching scream as the two guards lunged for his arms. He did not fight. He did not argue. He simply allowed himself to be dragged away, his heels carving long, pathetic marks across the expensive marble floor toward the doors that had once been his gateway to power. Julian did not hesitate. He no longer cared about dignity. He was terrified. He scrambled across the marble, his hands clawing at the polished stone until he reached the spot where Sterling had knelt. He threw himself forward, his forehead striking the floor with a dull thud. He crawled the last few feet. He grabbed the hem of Arthur's faded, paint-stained work pants. He buried his face in the rough fabric. "Please," Julian sobbed. His voice was no longer arrogant. It was high, thin, and broken. Please, Mr. Pendleton. Please, sir. I did not know. I swear I did not know. Arthur did not move. He stood like a statue. Dust from his boots drifted down onto Julian's expensive hand-tailored suit jacket. I have a Porsche, Julian pleaded, his fingers clutching the fabric so tightly his knuckles turned white. It is leased. I have payments. I have rent. My Rolex is on a high-interest credit card. If I lose this job, I lose everything. I am nothing without this position. Please, sir, I have a life. I have obligations. He looked up. His face was a mess of snot, sweat, and frantic desperation. I am so sorry for what I said. I was wrong. You are not. You are the furthest thing from what I called you. Please, sir, just one chance. I will work for free. I will do anything. Arthur looked down. His expression was completely unreadable. It was not angry. It was not sad. It was something much colder. He looked at Julian the way someone might look at a rusted machine that had finally seized up forever. There was no hatred left, no irritation, only the complete absence of interest. Arthur did not speak. He did not bend down to comfort the man crying at his feet. He did not pull his pant leg away. He simply stood there, completely still, his silence filling the great lobby like rising water. Julian felt that silence. He felt it settle over his shoulders like a sheet of lead. It was the sound of a door being locked forever. He realized then that his words, his pleas, and his pathetic explanations meant absolutely nothing. To Arthur Pendleton, Julian was not even a person worth hating. He was only a mistake that needed to be erased. The silence dragged on, second by second, each one stripping away the last remaining piece of Julian's pride. He realized he was no longer fighting for his job. He was begging a ghost for a future that had already been taken from him. Finally, Arthur let out a soft, whining breath. He did not say a word. He simply shifted his weight, and Julian felt the fabric of Arthur's pants slide out of his trembling, sweaty fingers. The old man simply turned his heavy boots, slowly and deliberately, toward the door. Arthur straightened his back. He brushed a speck of dust from his torn flannel shirt. He did not look at the broken man on the floor. He turned his attention to Richard Sterling, his voice lowering into a quiet, absolute finality. "The Bel Air property," Arthur said. "Buy it. Transfer the full amount directly from my primary account. Do it now." Arthur paused for one heavy heartbeat. He turned his head and looked at Julian. The broker was pressed against the base of the architectural model, his face buried in his hands, shaking with silent, crushing sobs. "And the commission from this sale," Arthur said, his eyes shifting back to Sterling. "Take every cent of it. Transfer the entire commission, plus the standard management fee, to the woman standing outside the front window, the one who cleans the floors every morning at 5. Arthur looked at Julian one last time. "As for this individual," Arthur said, his voice cold as deep space, "remove his name from the system. Terminate his access to every Sterling office in the country. Blacklist him from every brokerage firm in the state. I want him gone from this industry. Do it now." Arthur walked out through the heavy glass doors. He did not look back. 3 black bulletproof SUVs were waiting at the curb, their engines humming with low predatory power. The doors opened in perfect synchronization. He stepped into the middle vehicle. The convoy pulled away, leaving the city smog behind. Inside the lobby, Julian remained on the floor. He was no longer a broker. He was a man who had lost his identity. He reached down to his wrist. He unclasped the fake Rolex. He gently placed it on the cold marble floor, like one final offering to pay for a life he could no longer afford. The lobby became quiet again. Power had been reset. Order had been restored. Empty vessels always make the loudest noise. True power walks in silence. Do you think this broker got exactly what he deserved for his arrogance? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and share this story if you believe we should never judge a book by its cover.